Today we will analyze the plot of the 2015 film Tale of Tales. Well, here we go. The film takes place in 3 neighboring magical kingdoms. The film begins with a scene of a traveling circus performing at the royal residence. The actors perform in front of the king and queen of the Valley of Mists, as well as the nearest retinue. Oh, the king and court officials laugh at the performance, but his wife does not like it. At some point, the woman performing's dress comes unbuttoned, and the queen sees that the actress is pregnant. At the same moment, the woman rises from the throne and leaves. The king runs after his wife, apologizing for not knowing about the circus performer's pregnancy. He enters the royal chambers, where he asks her forgiveness. In the evening, a necromancer comes to see the king. He says that he knows about the queen's impossibility of getting pregnant. The sorcerer talks about the only way to give birth to a child. To do this, it is necessary to kill the sea monster and cut out its heart, which the virgin must boil, and as soon as the queen eats it, she will immediately become pregnant. The next day, the king puts on a special suit and goes down to the bottom of the lake. Where the sleeping monster is located, he pierces his neck. But the monster mortally wounds the man in agony. The royal retinue cuts out the monster's heart and shows it to the king, who dies at the same moment. The queen comes ashore. She looks indifferently at her husband's corpse and then carefully takes the heart and leaves. In the palace, they find a young girl who is still innocent and is forced to boil her heart. When the maid throws it into the cauldron, a moment later she notices how her belly begins to grow. The queen eats the cooked heart and gives birth to a child at night in the presence of her retinue. But together with her, in the servants' quarters, the cook also gives birth to a baby. 2 carriages are heading towards the palace, one containing the king of the wild mountains, who is accompanied by his little daughter and wife, and the one containing the king of the lonely cliff, who makes love to 2 ladies during the ride. Both arrived at the funeral of the ruler of the Valley of Mist. The drummers beat out a funeral march, and all the people follow the coffin with the deceased and sad faces. Everyone except the queen, who looks at her child with a smile, not paying attention to everything that is happening. 16 years later, the queen runs through the labyrinth, catching up with her son Elias, who is trying to hide. In the labyrinth, he meets his twin Yonek, with whom he runs away from the woman. Returning to the castle, the ruler sees how the boys rode off on a horse. She calls the maid to her and blames her for her son seeing the prince. She threatens to throw the woman and her child out of the castle if the boys meet again. When Elias returns to the palace, the queen calls him to her and reproaches him for seeing the servants. She forbids him to communicate with him and demands an apology. We are transported to the kingdom of a lonely cliff. After a stormy night, the king wakes up among half-naked women and tries to find at least one who is awake to make love to. When the man realizes that neither of them can wake up, he heads to the castle. Walking along the corridor, he hears beautiful singing coming from the street. Looking out the window, he sees a woman wrapped in a scarf. Before continuing to watch this video, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and click on the bell to not miss new videos. He asks who she is and how old she is, but the stranger is hiding in the house. The man sends his servant to her with a gift. However, the woman does not let the servant in, but asks to put the jewelry in a basket, which she pulls out of her window. It turns out that the voice that captivated the king belongs to 2 old women, sisters Dory and Imma. They try on the beads and do not dare return them to the king. That same night, a man comes to their house and confesses his terrible desire to take possession of the girl and asks to see him. Imma incites her sister to play along with the king, and as a result she asks the king to come back in a week and she will show him her finger. The ruler is a little perplexed, but still agrees and promises to come in 7 days. Now we are transported to the kingdom of wild mountains. His daughter Violetta plays in front of the king and court guests. While singing the song, the king is distracted by a flea, which initially pesters him, but then begins to amuse him. The ruler was so carried away by playing with the insect that he did not notice how his daughter stopped singing. Having modestly patted her, he successfully left, leaving the girl in a misunderstanding. Returning to his chambers, the king pierced his finger, allowing the flea to drink his blood, after which he put it in the box. The king was so carried away by playing with the flea that he abandoned all his affairs, refusing even to sign the papers for issuing the servants' salaries. One day, his daughter drops hints that she wants to get married and asks her father to find her a groom, but he says that it's not time yet. He brings meat to his new pet, which he named. The flea had already grown to the size of a small dog. In the palace, the queen of the Valley of Mists is preparing for bed. She calls her son passing by and asks him to put on earrings for her. When the boy puts on the jewelry, the woman begins to sniff him, and then the expression on her face changes. The prince goes to his chambers. It turns out that it was not Elias but his twin Yona. He tells his friend that he was able to deceive his mother. The prince is surprised and at the same time rejoices. He says that in 2 years, when he inherits the throne, they will rule together in turns. The queen overhears the boy's conversation. When Yona leaves, secretly leaving the palace through the basement, the queen catches him and tries to kill him. The boy hides among the pigs and then quietly escapes from the woman. The next day, Elias sees Yona saying goodbye to his mother and getting ready to leave. He runs to him and asks what happened, to which he replies that he needs to leave the kingdom. He wishes his friend good luck, mounts his horse and leaves. Meanwhile, the old woman Imma in the kingdom of Lonely Cliff is trying to rejuvenate her finger. She covers it with ointment and wraps it in a bandage, but on the appointed day, when she removes the bandage, she discovers that the finger has begun to look even worse. At this time, the king knocks on the door, who says that he has come to see the finger that was promised to him. Imma grabs Dora's hand and sticks her finger, which looks like a young girl's, into the doorway. The king begins to lick it, admiring its beauty and demanding that the girl show herself to him all over. Dora agrees to come to the king's chambers and spend the night with him, provided that all the candles are extinguished and everything happens in the dark, and to which the man agrees. That same evening, Imma uses wax to glue the folds of her sister's skin on her chest and back, and she goes to the castle. In the darkness, she lies down in bed, and the king with her. At night, a man wakes up and decides to look at the face of his chosen one. He holds up a candle and sees an ugly face and a flabby body. The man calls the guards and they throw Dora out of the window. However, thanks to the veil, the woman clings to the branches of the trees and does not break. She is found in the forest by a witch who frees Dora, and when she loses consciousness, it rejuvenates her. That same day, the king is hunting in the forest and discovers a naked Dora walking in the forest. However, she now looks like a young girl. Meanwhile, at night, the king of the wild mountains calls a doctor to him and asks to examine the flea, which has reached enormous sizes. While the doctor listens to the breathing of a huge insect, the flea dies. The next day, the king informs his daughter that he will arrange a wedding for her. However, he has not yet found a candidate and will organize a tournament. The winner will become the husband of Violetta, the king's daughter. The king skinned the flea and hung it in the hall, promising that whoever guessed who it belonged to would take his daughter. The tournament is won by an ogre giant, and the ruler has no choice but to keep his word, despite the protests of his daughter. The cannibal brings the girl to his cave, strewn with bones, where she must now live with him. Elias at this time runs away from the castle in search of Yonak. He learns from his mother that Yona left a few days ago and has not yet returned. The prince goes to look for a friend in the forest. The queen of the Valley of Mists, desperate to find her son, again turns to the necromancer for help. He says that he will have to pay a high price, to which the woman agrees. Meanwhile, Yona fell into a cave and injured his leg. He tries to get out, but at that moment he is suddenly attacked by a huge bat. The guy crawls away from her through a narrow opening, but the animal follows him. Yonak's screams were heard by Elias, who began to help the twin get out. Seeing Elias, the bat froze and stopped attacking. The young prince took advantage of this and killed the monster with a dagger, after which he and his friend got out of the cave. The bat's corpse began to transform, revealing the body of the enchanted queen. In the kingdom of the Lonely Cliff, Imma receives an invitation from the future queen to a wedding. The old woman comes to the palace, where she is met by a rejuvenated Dora. She marries the king. After the end of the banquet, Imma does not want to leave the palace and asks her to tell her sister how to become young again. But Dora says she doesn't know. She says it's like her skin has been removed. The king enters the chambers and Dora hides her sister behind the door, demanding that she not make a sound. But Imma begins to spy on how they make love, attracting the man's attention. The king calls the guards and the old woman is kicked out of the castle. She finds a master barber and asks to remove her skin in order to become young again. The woman is taken to the forest, where her skin is removed. She returns to the castle covered in blood. Meanwhile, the princess of the wild mountains continues to live with the ogre. In his absence, she meets a woman whom she asks for help. She promises to save her. The next day, when the giant is cleaning the skins, Violetta comes out of the cave onto the cliff and sees a young guy. He takes the girl and begins to cross the gorge on a tightrope. The cannibal smells the stranger and gives chase. When the cannibal almost overtakes the fugitives, the rope is cut and he falls into the gorge. Violetta rides in a carriage with a family of traveling artists. When they are suddenly attacked by a surviving cannibal, he begins to deal with each of the people, breaking their necks, after which he catches up with the princess. She pretends that she agrees to go with him to the cave, but when he invites her to climb on his back, Violetta cuts his throat. Covered in blood, the girl returns to her native castle and brings the giant's head in a bag. Her father kneels and asks for forgiveness. In the final scene, Violetta becomes queen in her father's place. The coronation is attended by the rulers of the neighboring kingdoms, Elias and the king of the lonely cliff, along with Dora. During the ceremony, Dora sees that her true appearance is returning to her, because of which she runs away from the palace. How do you like the film? Write your opinion in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like and click on the bell, so you don't miss new videos.